They didn't invade. They didn't announce it. They didn't even rush. While America was arguing on cable news, China was quietly rebuilding global power, piece by piece, using ports, factories, debt, and time. And the uncomfortable part? It worked. This story isn't about tanks or missiles. It's about spreadsheets, shipping lanes, and patience. Because the most effective power shifts don't look dramatic while they're happening. They look boring, technical, almost invisible. Until one day you wake up and realize the world doesn't run on your rules anymore. And that's where we start. Right now, most Americans still think of global power in Cold War terms. Who has the biggest military? Who wins the next war? Who shouts the loudest? China played a different game. Instead of asking, how do we defeat America, they asked, what does America need to function, and how do we position ourselves there? Trade, manufacturing, logistics, capital. Not dominance through destruction, dominance through dependency. And the timing was perfect. In the early 2000s, America was confident, almost careless. The Cold War was over. Globalization felt inevitable. China was admitted into the World Trade Organization in 2001. The assumption was simple. If China gets richer, it will become more like us, democratic, liberal, predictable. What actually happened was the opposite. China didn't liberalize its politics, it weaponized globalization. Factories exploded across its coastlines. Entire supply chains moved inside one country. Not just assembly, raw materials, components, logistics, shipping. At one point, China wasn't just making cheap goods, it was making everything. Electronics, machinery, textiles, pharmaceuticals. If it could be shipped, China could make it. And here's the part people miss. This wasn't just about low wages, it was about scale, coordination, and state planning. While American firms optimized for quarterly profits, China optimized for decades. The government built roads, ports, power plants ahead of demand. Banks loaned money not for efficiency, but for control. Losses were tolerated if they built capacity. Imagine running a business where profitability is optional, but dominance is mandatory. That's not capitalism, that's power engineering. By the 2010s, China had become the factory of the world. But factories alone don't create global power, they create leverage. So China moved upstream and downstream. Upstream, raw materials. Downstream, shipping, ports, finance. Look at ports. China didn't just export goods, it invested in the infrastructure that moves them. Ports in Africa, ports in Southeast Asia, ports in Southern Europe. Sometimes they were joint ventures, sometimes long-term leases, sometimes debt deals that quietly turned into control. The Belt and Road Initiative wasn't charity, it was a map. Railways connecting inland China to Europe, pipelines securing energy routes, ports turning trade choke points into Chinese-managed assets. None of this required a single shot fired, just contracts, loans, construction crews. Now let's talk about debt, because this is where the story gets uncomfortable. When developing countries needed money, China showed up fast. No lectures, no reforms, no democracy requirements, just funding. The terms often looked generous until repayment started. And when repayment failed, China didn't seize countries, it seized leverage. Long-term port leases, resource extraction rights, political influence. This wasn't accidental. It was a system where financial stress quietly converted into strategic advantage. And all the while, America was busy. Busy with financial crises, busy with wars in the Middle East, busy dismantling its own industrial base. Between 2000 and 2010, millions of U.S. manufacturing jobs disappeared. Entire regions hollowed out. Cheap goods flowed in. Factories shut down. Supply chains stretched across oceans. It felt efficient until it wasn't. COVID exposed the fragility overnight. Masks, chips, medicine. Suddenly, America realized it didn't control the basics anymore. China didn't create that dependence in one move. It created it slowly while no one was panicking. And here's the irony. China never had to surpass America in innovation to gain leverage. It just had to become indispensable. If you control manufacturing, you influence prices. If you control logistics, you influence timelines. If you control credit, you influence decisions. Power isn't always about force. Sometimes it's about being impossible to replace. Now, to be clear, this isn't a flawless strategy. China built too much, borrowed too much, created ghost cities and debt bubbles. Not every Belt and Road project succeeded. Not every country stayed friendly. And China still faces serious problems: aging population, capital controls, internal inefficiencies. This isn't a victory lap. It's a structural shift. The hype says China is replacing America tomorrow. That's wrong. The reality is more subtle and more dangerous. China doesn't need to replace the U.S. It just needs a world where American power is optional, where trade routes don't default to U.S. oversight, where the dollar isn't the only game in town, where allies have alternatives. That's the real game. Not domination, diversification away from American control. And the U.S. response? Late, fragmented, politicized. Reshoring sounds good on speeches, but rebuilding industrial ecosystems takes decades, not slogans. Meanwhile, China already built the scaffolding. And here's the part most people don't like to hear. China didn't win because it was smarter. It won because it was more patient. While America optimized for speed and profit, China optimized for endurance. While America assumed leadership was permanent, China assumed nothing lasts forever. So here we are, a world where supply chains are geopolitical weapons, where finance is strategy, where power moves quietly through infrastructure instead of armies. And the question isn't whether China is good or bad. The question is simpler and harder. If global power can be rebuilt this quietly, if dominance can shift without headlines, if the rules can change while everyone is distracted, what else are we missing right now? Because the most dangerous shifts in history aren't the ones that arrive loudly. They're the ones that finish building before anyone notices they started. China didn't conquer the world with noise. It waited, built, connected. And while America was watching something else, China made itself indispensable. This isn't a story about one nation winning and another losing. It's a warning about how power works now. Not through tanks, but through systems. And the real question isn't how far China has gone. It's this: when the next shift happens, will we even notice it before it's already done? If this story made you uncomfortable, that's the point. These shifts don't come with breaking news banners. They happen quietly in supply chains, balance sheets, and long-term plans. So if you want to understand how power really moves in the modern world, not the headlines, not the speeches, stay here. Subscribe, because the next system is already being built.